Happy Friday, everybody. Thanks for joining us here for Wake Up Charlotte to go. I'm Ben Thompson, joined by all my colleagues you know from Wake Up Charlotte. And this morning, we're talking about what is a somber anniversary for sure. It's the 20th anniversary of 9/11. That is tomorrow. We spent the morning talking about it here on Wake Up Charlotte, and you'll see coverage of it throughout today and the weekend here on WCNC Charlotte. I know on Flashpoint coming up this weekend, I speak to a veteran of both the Afghan and Iraqi war. He lives now here in North Carolina and talked about the ultimate price paid by families on that day 20 years ago, as well as families over the course of the last 20 years and the wars our country has been fighting overseas. So this morning we want to know, what do you remember most of that day 20 years ago? What were you doing? Where were you at? Another interesting question that I'm getting a lot of feedback from on Twitter is I ask folks, do you feel like the United States is safer today than it was 20 years ago? We've gotten a big reaction and a poll sort of evenly split. So let us know what you think. And Sarah, you spoke to some folks here who live here in Charlotte, but in the Charlotte area, but were there when it happened in Lower Manhattan 20 years ago.
Yes, one was a firefighter, one was a bond broker. So one was on the 25th floor. And his name's Steve Giordano, and the plane crashed into the North Tower, and he talks about trying to get down the stairs. And when he was about on the 7th floor, the other plane crashed into the South Tower, and he thought, well, this is it. And he didn't actually meet Peter Blach, who's the firefighter who was one of the first responders there, and remembers watching the plane go right into the tower. He was having a cup of coffee that day at the fire station, and he got trapped, Peter, with a group of people in stairwell B. They call this miracle stairway or stairwell B. There's a whole documentary on it on Hulu or the History Channel that he's interviewed in. That's out right now if you want to watch it. And he just talks about how he cannot believe the people in stairwell B survived the North Tower collapse for some, miracle. And of course, he got out and then went back and kept working and helping people. And I had the privilege of talking to them. That story is on our website, WCNC.com. Maybe our web team can post the link to it on the comments here. But, unfortunately, in news, we can only condense everything for so long, but thankfully we have our web team where we can do longer pieces and stuff. And Peter had mentioned in my story that Ben, you said you thought was the most interesting part. He said North Carolina is the only state that does not have a cancer bill, a presumptive cancer bill for firefighters. So on our website, this all explains it. But he met this man named Tom Brewer, who is a local firefighter here in Charlotte. He's also the president of the Charlotte Firefighters Association, the 9/11 benefits coordinator, and the North Carolina Cancer Bill advocate. So the 9/11 benefits, that is how Tom and Peter met. And that was what John Stewart was fighting for. You remember all that. It was in the news and everything. And President Trump signed off on that. And so I was trying to read some of my notes here, but the 9/11 benefits, the bill extends a victims fund. It was created after September 11th, and it essentially makes these funds permanent. It extends it through 2092. Now, what they were talking about here, what North Carolina doesn't have, is the Firefighters Fighting Cancer Act. And so that is North Carolina lawmakers. And I have all these links. We have covered this thoroughly, so you can watch all the stories we've done in the past on this, our reporters. But we did a story back in April. North Carolina lawmakers were debating legislation to address the alarming spike in firefighters who are diagnosed with cancer. So this is House Bill 535. It would provide a lump sum of $25,000 to firefighters for each cancer diagnosis they receive, up to $50,000 total. It would also cover up to $12,000 in out-of-pocket medical expenses, and it would provide disability benefits for firefighters who can no longer work because of their diagnosis. So again, I just want to explain that it was too long for the piece, but we have a separate story on our website with Tom Brewer, my interview with him. They're explaining all this, and then again, we have the links to that on our website too. I hope that explained it.
Yeah, well, and it's like, in many cases, like the gentleman you spoke to, they ran to ground zero to take care of people and save people, and Lord knows we need to be taking care of them and making sure that they are, accounted for and taken care of by all of us. Larry and Chris are going to get to you in just a second, but just want to read some of the comments. Anna said she was getting ready for work. The lady, the cubicle next to her, started crying, going hysterical. Monica with a testimony that's just mind-numbing. She said she was in New York on the way to the Statue of Liberty and the North Tower restaurant. Luckily, though, they slept in, so they weren't there when it crashed. So
wow.
Goodness gracious! And
Wow,
Larry, you were right here in this TV station.
Yeah, it was. We were all here at the station. We do every at 56, at 26 and 56. We do what's called a cut-in. They tossed from the Today Show to us, and we're sitting here. It was about, I think it was maybe 8:48, something like that, and someone came over, walked into the studio, said, "I think the Today Show is going to stay on for. There must be a small plane that has crashed up there, and maybe into one of the towers up there." So we're thinking, well, that's interesting, and then obviously, to see that dramatic footage that the Today Show showed, they were doing an interview about Howard Hughes, and that's when all the news came in, and Matt Lauer, Katie Couric obviously took over. And just to see all that and sit here and watch that, the horrible situation that happened on that day, and to be that close to it. And, from that point on, NBC basically took over for about the next 24 hours. They stayed on straight with that story.
Yeah, and if you've ever gone to the memorial in New York City, you can't help but just turn silent. You feel like the world just stops, because if you haven't seen that, just seeing the magnitude of how big those buildings are and just how many names are on there. And Monica, like the story that you had just said, a lot of people had called off work or were supposed to be at one place or another, that still think to this day. And I don't think this is ever going to be a thing that compares to this, that everyone knows where they were, how they were feeling, what it was like. It's almost like that memory is just stamped and frozen in time for all of us when that went down.
And there's so many beautiful memorials here as well, events going on today and this weekend. I told you guys on the air, the Cornelius Fire Department has an unbelievable memorial of the Twin Towers, and then it has a piece of the tower in the middle of it. And so that opened back in 2016, and that is where Peter and Steve actually met. And they asked Steve to speak at it back in 2016, and he said he placed his hand on part of that tower, that piece that's there, and then he got up to speak, and he said he just lost it because it was the first time, he had really touched that piece of tower and had to speak about it publicly. But that is how those two men met and bonded, and their story is just, again, so unbelievable.
I had the chance back in 2016 to be at the memorial here, the 5-year anniversary in Uptown at Romero Bearden Park, and I met Andrew Spadero and Tommy Ambury. They worked along with Stephen Coakley, who lost his life. His sister lives here with engine number 217, and to meet those two guys and to be there with them was a pretty humbling experience, and an experience when you see two people who were there, and then that one of their buddies, one of their coworkers, one of the fellow firemen lost his life. It's pretty dramatic, and it makes you think, we can all be so thankful for the amazing work that those firefighters, the medic, all those first responders do every day of their life.
Yeah, Larry, what really stuck with me when I was interviewing Peter, he said all 12 of his groomsmen in his wedding party were first responders. They either died in 9/11 or they died from health issues. They're all gone. He said he lost his entire wedding party. And that just, oh my gosh, when I heard him say that.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ileana chiming in and saying that she was in her classroom with her students in New York City. Can't imagine what that was like at that time. The uncertainty that the whole country, the whole world was feeling, but specifically in New York City, which we know was the center of it all. Joy said she was at CPC trying to figure out what was happening. It strikes me, if you were not in front of a TV, there was the internet at that point, but it was not as widespread. There was not really streaming. So if you were not in front of a TV, you were sort of at a loss about what was happening. So Joy, I think a lot of folks were in that situation. And then Sylvia saying she was at a nursing facility, and everybody was in tears and in shock once they realized what exactly happened. And James just responding that he was in high school going into third period English as it unfolded on live TV. And I do feel like no matter what you were doing, whether you were at school or work, within an hour or so, almost the entire country was gathered around a TV set wherever they could find it. If they were in a department store, if they were at the mechanic, if they got in front of a TV to watch it unfold.
Yeah, and Larry, I like what you said also earlier. They said a small plane. At first, we had no idea what was going on, and just watching the story unfold and hearing the reports. And I've seen multiple documentaries about how that unfolded because it didn't really seem believable. And then just seeing the magnitude unravel, it's one of the worst news days and things that ever happened to our country. But like you said, third period English class. Why would you ever remember a detail like that if it wasn't fundamentals? That's incredible, James.
All right, folks, that's going to have to do it for this edition of Wake Up Charlotte to Go. Of course, you can always weigh in there online, and we hope you have a good weekend, and we'll see you back here Monday morning on Wake Up Charlotte.